Chag Sameach, everyone, and welcome to the second night of Pesach. And we're going to open to page 1. The numbers are at the top of the page for the blessing over the candles. Now, because it's not Friday evening, being the second night of Passover this year, we're just going to say the blessing over the Yom Tov candles, which is blessing A on page 1. There we go. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lahadlik ner shel Yom Tov. Amen. I'm going to turn to page 2. Now, I know that traditionally we save the Shehechianu blessing for the first time we do something, for the first night of the holiday, for the first Seder. But this is my first Seder with all of you, so I would like to say the Shehechianu because I am so grateful to have made it to this time. So the Shehechianu is on the top of page 2. And if you feel comfortable and so moved, I invite you to say it with me. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehechianu v'kiyamanu v'higianu lazman hazeh. Blessed are you, eternal our God, ruler of the universe, who gave us life and kept us strong and brought us to this time. I'm so grateful to be together in this way today for this holiday. We're going to continue with the blessing of our wine or our juice on the bottom of page 2. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri hagafen l'chaim. I'm really happy to be able to use my childhood Kiddush cup. So we're going to turn to page 3 for the karpas. Now the karpas is some leafy green or leafy vegetable that reminds us of springtime. And frequently people use parsley. At least my family always did. Curly leaf parsley. That was always our karpas. So you'll see I have karpas on my Seder plate. Ooh, some of it fell. Put it all back together here. There we go. So I have karpas on the Seder plate, and I have some karpas on my personal plate because we're going to eat the karpas in just a minute after we say the blessing. So first, let's read about karpas. I'm on page 3. I invite you to read with me in the English. Karpas represents spring and new growth, rebirth and the beginning of new life. We taste in this fresh vegetable all the potential in nature and in ourselves. Tonight we celebrate our growth and flowering of our spirit and of our voices. We do not taste the vegetable alone. We dip it into salt water, recalling the tears our ancestors shed during their long years in slavery. We mix bitterness with sweetness, slavery with freedom, past with future. We live with contrasts because we know that no moment exists without a multitude of combinations, sorrow and joy, pain and comfort, despair and hope. And I think that we have all experienced all of those emotions in the past few years, in the past few months, maybe even just today. So holding all of that, the opportunity for new growth, but also the bitterness of loss, and specifically on Passover, we think of the bitterness of slavery, we're going to take our karpas, going to dip it in our salt water, and then we're going to say the blessing on the bottom of page 3 in the Hebrew, and then we're going to eat our karpas. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri ha'adama. No matter how salty I make the water, and somehow I always make this water incredibly salty, I find that so refreshing. I love parsley in salt water. I've loved it since I was a kid, and I love it to this day. We continue with the 4 questions. Page 4. Traditionally, the 4 questions were asked by the youngest person at the Seder. Well, seeing as in this format, we're each kind of by ourselves, and I am certainly by myself in my own home, I am by default the youngest. So I will sing the 4 questions, but I invite you to sing them with me. You can sing them in Hebrew, in English, in Yiddish, in any language that you know and feel comfortable with. We're on page 4, and then we're going to read some of the English together on page 5. Ma nishtana halayla hazeh mikol haleilot shebechol haleilot anu ochlin chametz umatzah Halayla hazeh, kulo matzah. Halayla hazeh, kulo matzah. Shebechol halelot anu ochlin she'ar yerakot. Halayla hazeh, maror. Halayla hazeh, maror. Shebechol halelot en anu matbilin afilu pa'am echad. Halayla hazeh sheteh pe'amim. Halayla hazeh sheteh pe'amim. Shebechol halelot anu ochlin ben yoshvinu ven mesubin. Halayla hazeh, kulan mesubin. Halayla hazeh, kulan mesubin. I invite you to read the English with me on page 5. Why is this night different from all other nights? On all other nights, we eat leavened bread or matzah. On this night, we eat only matzah. On all other nights, we eat various kinds of vegetables. On this night, we eat maror, a bitter vegetable. On all other nights, we do not dip even once. On this night, we dip twice. On all other nights, we eat either sitting up or reclining. On this night, we all recline. We're going to continue with telling the story of the Seder with the 4 children on page 5, right at the bottom of the same page we're on. Now, tradition teaches that there are 4 types of children or people who need to learn the story of the Exodus and the traditions of the Seder. These are the wise child or person, the wicked child or person, the simple child or person, and the child who does not know enough to ask a question. Yet we know that no child, no person is completely wise or wicked, always simple, or never with a question. These qualities are aspects of all of us at various times. We bring our full selves with all of our complexity to the Seder this evening to experience redemption. And in fact, I would argue, as I have argued many times before, that it is only when we bring all of these various parts of ourselves and all of these various people within our communities together that we can actually fully know and truly experience redemption. We cannot be free until all of us are free. And each of us can be represented by one of these 4 children or people throughout our lives, throughout the years, throughout illness and struggle and joy and triumph. We've all had a moment where we've been each one of them. And so it's really when we see our whole community as a whole community, with everybody included, no matter our capacities, our abilities, whether they're enduring or passing, when we can take everybody as they are today and always as a whole community, then we can experience redemption. And I believe that that's the ultimate story, the ultimate goal, the lesson of Pesach. We're going to continue now on page H6, page 6 essentially, with the story. I invite you, if you're comfortable, to read with me in the English. We're on page 6. My father was a wandering Aramean. He went down to Egypt with meager numbers and lived there, but there he became a great and very populous nation. The Egyptians dealt harshly with us and oppressed us. They imposed heavy labor upon us. We cried to the Eternal One, the God of our ancestors, who heard our plea and saw our plight, our misery, and our oppression. Then the Eternal One freed us from Egypt by his mighty hand and an outstretched arm, and awesome power, and by signs and portents. Now, our tradition teaches us that we can never be fully and truly joyful when others are suffering. It's such a beautiful lesson of our tradition. And while we are so very deeply grateful that we are free from Egypt and free from the slavery we experienced there, we know that the Egyptians suffered in order for us to gain our freedom. So there is a custom that we take our wine or our juice and that we take a few drops out for each plague. So I will do that in honor of all of us, though if you are able and interested, you can also join me in doing that. So we'll say the plagues in Hebrew and in English, one after another. And for each plague, we'll take a drop out of our cups. Because a full cup of wine or juice is seen as a symbol of full joy, so we are diminishing intentionally our joy when we recognize the suffering and the death of the Egyptians as part of the journey in order for us to become free. Okay. Dam, blood. Sfardea, frogs. Kinim, lice. Arov, beasts. Dever, cattle disease. Shchin, boils. Barad, hail. Arbe, locusts. Choshech, darkness. Makat bechorot, the slaying of the firstborn. Continue to page 7 for Dayenu, a word which means it's enough. If God had only brought us out of Egypt, it would have been enough. But God also brought us through the wilderness. If God had only brought us through the wilderness, it would have been enough. But God also gave us Shabbat. If God had only done those things, it would have been enough. But God also gave us Torah, Dayenu. So I invite you to join with me in singing. We're going to be singing according to the transliteration on page 7. That's the Hebrew and the English words. Ilu hotzianu mi Mitzrayim, hotzianu mi Mitzrayim, dayenu, 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 dayenu. Ilu natananu et hashabat, natananu et hashabat, dayenu, 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 dayenu. Ilu natananu et haTorah, natananu et haTorah, dayenu, 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 dayenu. One more time. Dayenu, 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 dayenu. It would have been enough. We are so grateful. So during Pesach, we get to make motzi on matzah. So I have my matzah cover here, my 3-part matzah cover. Pull out some matzah. Take a little piece. So we're going to say both motzi and a special blessing over matzah, over our matzah. So you're going to have a piece of matzah as well. And I invite you to say both blessings, and then we will eat our matzah, our lechem oni, our poor man's bread, the bread of affliction. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Now the special blessing just over the matzah, bottom of page 8. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu al achilat matzah. Now we're going to have our next ritual food, page 9, the maror, horseradish. And I have a fresh horseradish root here, which I have cut into some smaller pieces to make it more manageable. On Pesach, we eat some kind of bitter herb, frequently horseradish for those of us who are of Ashkenazi descent, to remind us of the bitterness of slavery. It's not supposed to be an enjoyable thing to eat. We're not eating this because we like to eat raw horseradish. We're eating this because we want a small sensory reminder of difficulty. So I invite you to get your piece of horseradish or whatever you're using for your maror. We're going to say the blessing on page 9, and then we're going to eat it together. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu al achilat maror. Oh, I can feel it burning all the way down. Oh, maror. Okay. Well, we've reached the point in our service when we would traditionally now have a meal. But because you're going to have a meal after the Seder, we're going to have a meal we're going to have an honorary meal. So we're going to have our Hillel sandwich. We're going to take our matzah and our maror, and we're going to eat it with the horseradish. It is the horseradish. We're going to eat it with the charoset, the apple mixture, which is meant to remind us of the mortar in the bricks in Egypt. So you take your charoset, which I love, and you put it on the piece of matzah, and then you get a little bit more of that maror. And you're going to put it in there, and you're going to make a sandwich. And this is going to stand in for our meal. So when we eat this, I want us all to think about that delicious meal that we're going to have as soon as the Seder ends. So that when we say grace, when we say birkat, a version of thanks, giving thanks after this meal, this sandwich, that we have in our mind all the delicious food that we're going to have. So this is our stand-in. So I invite you to enjoy your charoset, your maror, and your matzah. I gotta say, I like it better that way. Charoset, while you're eating, I'll just tell you, the charoset is a really wonderful and interesting ritual food because it varies incredibly all over the world, my different community and different family. It seems like each family has their own personal recipe for charoset, and there's no one right answer. Charoset is just meant to remind us of the mortar, of the bricks that the Israelites, our ancestors, were building in Egypt. So anything that does that is perfectly good charoset. So my family uses a mixture of apples and walnuts, cinnamon and grape juice or wine. But I have now learned of other versions of charoset that include apricots and dates and raisins. I even just learned about a charoset, and this is a Sephardi version of charoset, that actually gets formed into balls. So they're like these little charoset formed balls that you then eat. And I learned of another one that's kind of a date syrup with crumbled up nuts on top that you can dip into it. Charoset varies by community. So whatever your family's version of charoset is, I hope that you enjoy it. I hope that that was a nice little taste of the meal to come. Because now we're going to turn our attention to giving thanks for the food that we have. And we are so grateful that we are able to eat, and that we're able to eat as much as we need to, even often as much as we want, and that the food is delicious and nourishing. So we're on page 9 with the blessing after the meal, and I invite you to read with me in the Hebrew and the English. We praise you, Holy One, our God, ruler of the universe, who has given us freedom, provided food for us and for the world, and enabled us to gather together for this Seder. We praise you, Holy One, our God, creator of life and maker of peace, and we express our gratitude to you for all that we have. Oseh shalom bimromav, hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'imru amen. Ya'aseh shalom, Shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. 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 ve'al kol yoshvei tevel v'meru. Amen. May the one who makes peace in the high heavens above make peace for us, for all Israel, and for all who dwell on earth. And let us say, Amen. So in addition to opening our doors to all those who are hungry and need to eat at Pesach, we also have the custom of opening our doors to Eliyahu Hanavi, Elijah the prophet. We even set a glass of wine out for him, or juice. I've also set a goblet of water for the prophet Miriam, who enabled our ancestors to survive in the desert by helping to find the water. So we are going to sing Eliyahu Hanavi on page 10 together and hope that Elijah the prophet comes to this Seder, comes to all of our Seders, and helps to usher in a time of peace and better understanding for each other. Hopefully by going to everybody's Seders, Elijah can give us some pointers on how to better understand each other, how to connect, how to talk, and how to make meaningful relationships to people who are incredibly different and yet share the same humanity. Page 10, Eliyahu Hanavi. Eliyahu Hanavi, Eliyahu Atishbi, Eliyahu, Eliyahu, Eliyahu Hagiladi, Bimera Veyamenu, Yavo Eleinu, Mashiach ben David, Mashiach ben David, Eliyahu Hanavi, Eliyahu Hatishbi, Eliyahu, Eliyahu, Eliyahu Hagiladi. We continue on page 11 with Adirhu. Adirhu, Adirhu, Yivne Veto Bekarov, Bimhera, Bimhera, Biyamenu Bekarov, El B'nei, El B'nei, B'nei Beitcha Bekarov, Bachorhu, Gadolhu, Dagulhu, Yivne Beito Bekarov, Bimhera, Bimhera, Biyamenu Bekarov, El B'nei, El B'nei, B'nei Beitcha Bekarov, Hadorhu, Vatikhu, Zakaihu, Chasidhu, Yivne Beito Bekarov, Bimhera, Bimhera, Biyamenu Bekarov, El B'nei, El B'nei, B'nei Beitcha Bekarov, Tahorhu, Yachidhu, Kabirhu, Lamudhu, Melechu, Norahu, Sagivhu, Izuvhu, Podehu, Tzadikhu, Yivne Veito Bekarov, Bimhera, Bimhera, Biyamenu Bekarov, El B'nei, El B'nei, B'nei Beitcha Bekarov, Kadoshu, Rachumhu, Shadaihu, Takifhu, Yivne Beito Bekarov, Bimhera, Bimhera, Biyamenu Bekarov, El B'nei, El b'nei beitcha b'karov. We're going to continue with our songs on page 13 with Echad mi yodea, which means who knows one. I invite you to join me in singing the Hebrew. You can sing the English, you can just listen. The English for Echad mi yodea is on page 14. Echad mi yodea, Echad mi yodea, Echad Eloheinu, 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 שבשמיים ובארץ, שניים יודע, שניים אני יודע, שני לוחות הברית, אחד אלוהינו, 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 שבשמיים ובארץ, שלושה מי יודע, שלושה אני יודע, שלושה אבות, שני לוחות הברית, אחד אלוהינו, 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 שבשמיים ובארץ. 13 מי יודע, 13 אני יודע, 13 מידיה, 12 שבטיה, 11 כוכביה, 10 דבריה, 9 ירחי לידה, 8 ימי מילה, 7 ימי שבתה, 6 סדרי משנה, 5 חומשי תורה, 4 אמהות, 3 אבות, 2 לוחות הברית, אחד אלוהינו, 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 שבשמיים ובארץ. I'll read Who Knows 13 in the English because that sums up the entire song. Who knows 13? I know 13. 13 are the attributes of God. 12 are the tribes of Israel. 11 are the stars of Joseph's dream. 10 are the commandments of Sinai. 9 are the months to childbirth. 8 are the days to circumcision. 7 are the days of the week. 6 are the orders of the Mishnah. 5 are the orders of the Torah. 4 are our matriarchs. 3 are our patriarchs. 2 are the tablets of the covenant. And 1 is our God in heaven and on earth. We're going to continue now with what is probably one of the most well-known and beloved of the Passover songs, Chad Gadya. It's a song about a little goat who has a pretty unfortunate day. It's actually in Aramaic, it's not in Hebrew, though Hebrew and Aramaic use the same language, the same letters rather, excuse me. So if it sounds a little bit different, that's probably why. So we don't have the full song, much like Echad mi yodea, we have kind of the beginning and then the end. So we're going to sing it all in the Aramaic, and then I'm going to read the English final verse together. I invite you to read with me then, because that will give us the full story. So we're going to start singing on page 15. Chad Gadya, Chad Gadya, Dizvan Abba Bitrezuze, Chad Gadya, Chad Gadya, Ve'ata Shunra Ve'achal Gadya, Dizvan Abba Bitrezuze, Chad Gadya, Chad Gadya, Ve'ata chalva ve'nashach leshunra de'achal Gadya, Dizvan Abba bitrezuze, Chad Gadya, Chad Gadya, Ve'ata chutra ve'chika lechalba de'nashach leshunra de'achal Gadya, Dizvan Abba Bitrezuze, Chad Gadya, Chad Gadya. Ve'ata Kadosh Baruch Hu, Ve'shachat lemelech hamavet, De'shachat leshochet, De'shachat letorah, De'shata lemaya, De'chava lenora, De'shtaraf lechutra, De'chika lechalva, De'nashach leshunra, De'acha legadya. Dizvan Abba Bitrezuze, Chad Gadya, Chad Gadya. We're going to read that final verse on the bottom of 16, and that will give us the whole story. Then came the Holy One and killed the angel of death, who killed the shochet, who killed the ox, that drank the water, that quenched the fire, that burnt the stick, that beat the dog, that bit the cat, that ate the kid, that my father bought for 2 zuzim. Chad Gadya, Chad Gadya. So now we have another song here on page 17. So we'll sing it together, a nice little short one. We're going to sing according to the transliteration. Avadim Hayinu, Hayinu, Ata ben Nechorim, ben Nechorim. Avadim Hayinu, Ata ben Nechorim, ben Nechorim. Avadim Hayinu, Ata ben Nechorim, ben Nechorim. We were slaves once, but now we are free. And we carry the obligation of Pesach to make sure that all are free. Page 18, Psalm 114. Halfway through it becomes call and response. I'll tell you when that happens, so I invite you to sing along with me. Betzeit Yisrael mi-Mitzrayim, Beit Yaakov mehamloez. Betzeit Yisrael mi-Mitzrayim, Beit Yaakov mehamloez. Hayta Yehuda lekodsho, Yisrael mamshlotav. Hayam Ra'ah Vayanos Hayarden, Yisov le'achor, Heharim Raktu Che'elim, Gevaot Kivnei Tzon. Repeat after me. Malech Hayam Kitadus Hayarden Tisov le'achor, Eharim Tirkedu chelim, Gevaot Kivnei Tzon. Milifnei Adon, Chuli Aretz, Milifnei Elohai Yaakov, Hahofchi Hatzur, Agamayim, Chalamish, Lemaiноmayim. And with that, we're going to conclude our Seder. We're going to sing one song that's not in our Haggadahs, Leshana Haba'ah B'Yerushalayim, which means next year may we be in Jerusalem. But I just hope that next year we can all be safe enough to be able to be together. wherever we are. Lashana haba'a, Lashana haba'a, Lashana haba'a b'Yerushalayim. Lashana haba'a, Lashana haba'a, Lashana haba'a b'Yerushalayim. Lashana haba'a, Lashana haba'a b'Yerushalayim. Lashana haba'a, Lashana haba'a b'Yerushalayim. Chag Sameach, everyone. I hope you have a joyous, meaningful Pesach. Next year, may we all be safe and healthy and together. Chag Sameach, everyone.